at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire tonight. The government has published its blueprint for UK relations with the European Union. The proposal is aimed at ensuring trade cooperation with no hard border for Northern Ireland and global trade deals for the UK. The British diver who helped rescue the 12 schoolboys and their football coach from a flooded cave in Thailand says he doesn't consider himself a hero. So more than 2 years after the Brexit referendum, the government has published its detailed plans for future relations with the EU. The blueprint expands on last Friday's Chequers agreement that sparked the resignations of 2 cabinet ministers. The new Brexit secretary, Dominic Raab, said the white paper was ambitious and pragmatic. Others say it's a bad deal for Britain. Our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg, has been studying the contents.
Every now and then, in boring brown-looking boxes, are government documents that really matter. In there, Theresa May's plan for life outside the EU.
We've just come out of this morning's briefing. The document has been kept so tightly under wraps that we haven't actually been allowed to bring it out of the building. The white paper does in detail spell out a much closer relationship with the rest of the EU after Brexit than many Brexiteers had hoped for. But from the Prime Minister's point of view, it's time to compromise and accept we can't have it all.
The 98-page document spells out a common rule book for manufacturing. The UK will follow EU rules to avoid a hard border in Ireland. But the government isn't aiming for one big agreement on services, but new arrangements instead, to cover the vast majority of the economy. The overall deal will be policed by a new governing body. The European Court won't have the final say, but will interpret the rules. And while the government will end unlimited immigration from the EU, its citizens will be able to come without visas to do paid work in some circumstances, not yet defined. For those who like dramatic breaks with the established order, guess who? It's not as much of a separation as Brexit might have been. Before ministers had a chance to explain their plan, President Trump tried to do it for them.
I've been reading a lot about Brexit over the last couple of days, and it seems to be turning a little bit differently, where they're getting at least partially involved back with the European Union. I don't know if that's what they voted for.
Awkward, given that the Prime Minister was leaving for home to welcome the American President on his visit to the UK.
They voted for us to take back control of our money, our law and our borders, and that's exactly what we will do. We will stop sending vast contributions to the EU every year. We will ensure that the European Court of Justice doesn't have jurisdiction in the UK any longer, and we will ensure that we bring an end to free movement.
The white paper should have been made available. It will be immediately.
But the brand new Brexit secretary had some problems explaining at home.
As soon as it's practically possible.
Only at the very last minute did MPs see the plan. Boxes rushed into the Commons, copies being flung around. There was such a ruckus that the session was stopped.
I will therefore suspend the sitting of the House.
Smooth and orderly Brexit? Not quite.
Today has been shambolic for the government. It's evidence of how they're conducting negotiations. This white paper should have been published over a year ago. It's already overdue, and then it wasn't ready for scrutiny in Parliament. So shambles is an overused word in politics, but today it really describes what's gone on.
And how can the government squeeze it past the divided Brexiteers and former Remainers in the Tory party? We asked a strong member of each camp.
The UK government has compromised again. We've compromised too far.
These regulations aren't sort of monstrously unfeasible, unworkable regulations. I don't think either side, those who regret the result and those who want a complete break with Europe tomorrow morning, should start by dismissing what is in the white paper.
There is going to be a time for peace and reconciliation in the Conservative Party, but it's not now and it's not next week.
Keeping it friendly isn't likely, and voters on all sides might not be persuaded. Compromise never comes without a cost.
Laura Kuenssberg. Well, British firms, big and small, have been waiting to see the shape of the proposed trade relations with the EU after Brexit. But do these plans tackle the concerns of British business, especially in relation to trade, not only in goods but also in services, after the UK leaves the EU? Well, our business editor Simon Jack has been finding out.
Borders are bad for business. Delays can slow the wheels of trade. The government hoped today's white paper would reassure companies that goods travelling between the UK and the EU could carry on much as they do now, by creating a free trade area using the EU rulebook on standards and regulations, so no checks are needed. Vital to businesses like cheesemaker Richard Clothier.
Yeah, have a good sniff of that.
He exports over £10 million worth of cheddar to France every year. So what does he make of it?
I think it's a good white paper in terms of it sets out the intent to trade freely with Europe ongoing. I'm concerned about the practicality of administering customs, particularly within the food sector where the supply chains are really complex and there have been issues, in the past. So I think it'd be very difficult to sell this deal to Europe.
But it's finance more than food that feeds the UK economy. Services account for 80% of everything the UK earns, produces and consumes. Services like banking, law and insurance. And here the government's plan is different.
Here at Lloyd's of London, tens of billions of euros worth of insurance cover are sold to European customers every year. And when it comes to services like finance, the white paper makes clear that there won't necessarily be a single rule book, and there won't necessarily be business as usual.
The City hoped the UK and the EU could respect each other's rulemaking process without it being identical. The government thought that would be a hard sell in Brussels, so the UK is proposing to go its own way, which will make some services harder to sell in Europe. A mistake, say finance chiefs.
Professional and financial services are really not catered for at all, and it's very disappointing. It's not providing the certainty we need, so if anything, it's going to accelerate our plans. Lloyd's, for instance, we're moving to Brussels. We will be full steam ahead, and many other banks, insurers and other professional service firms will be moving at pace now.
Business groups want more detail, more urgency and more cooperation from the EU.
They want the EU now to engage. We've had flexibility on our side. We now need similar constructiveness and flexibility on the EU side. This is time to get round the table because it's become, I think, for businesses a race against time.
This white paper is not a solution, it's an aspiration. The tough negotiations don't end but start here, and business knows it. Simon Jack, BBC News.
One of the British divers who helped find 12 boys trapped in a cave for more than 2 weeks in northern Thailand has been speaking publicly about his part in the remarkable rescue mission. John Volontaire, who helped lead them out, said it was a huge relief that the boys had all been brought out alive. Our correspondent John Kay has more details.
Quietly, modestly, with all his diving gear, John Volanthen returned to Britain. Praised by strangers, but playing down what he'd done.
We're not heroes. What we do is very calculating, very calm. It's quite the opposite. We take it one step at a time, and hopefully, as we've managed to in this case, we come up with a result.
And what a result.
How many of you? 13. Brilliant.
It was John who found the young footballers in the cave and then worked with many others to get them out. An extraordinary rescue, the most challenging conditions, a race against time.
An international team of military and civilian divers working alongside the Thai Navy. Everybody pulled together and the results speak for themselves. So we're just very happy that the boys are out and safe.
We've got someone who's done something so heroic.
Pride in the North Somerset village where John Volanthen is a scout leader.
We teach children as part of the Scouts and Girl Guiding movement to think of others before themselves, to think about the world around them. And he's just taken that to the sort of ultimate.
There are calls for honours, but John Volanthen says cave rescuing is just his hobby.
But everyone's very proud.
Now it's time to sleep and get back to the day job in IT. John Kay, BBC News.
Kylie Jenner, a star of the reality TV series Keeping Up with the Kardashians, is set to become one of the youngest ever self-made billionaires. That's according to the business magazine Forbes. The 20-year-old has amassed a fortune of more than £600 million after starting to sell cosmetics less than 3 years ago. Our correspondent Chichi Izundu has the details, and her report contains flash photography.
Kylie Jenner, 20 years old, a new mum, and according to Forbes magazine, 100 million short of being the youngest ever self-made billionaire.
We knew we didn't want to do this with anyone else. I didn't want to sell in any other store.
She's the youngest of the Kardashian-Jenner family and has featured on their reality TV show Keeping Up with the Kardashians from the age of 10. But her fortune comes from selling lipsticks and lip liners.
I really wanted to show you guys first.
$900 million is how much she's estimated to be worth, and she's amassed that amount in just under 3 years.
What's interesting with Kylie Jenner is that she obviously endorses brands, but with her makeup range, she is the brand, and she already has this huge social following. So suddenly, her social following becomes her potential customer base. So there's a lot of money to be had when she has over 110 million people following her on Instagram.
And that's the difference between her and more traditional brands. Her kind of audience want quick-to-market products they find out about on social media.
And that's one of the contributing factors to Kylie's success. She wears her makeup and shows her tens of millions of social media followers exactly how to use it. The only problem is that not everyone is impressed with the term self-made billionaire.
Her family have minted. I'm not at all.